All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Happy hump day. Happy Monday. Looks like we've got a lot of people who signed up for this webinar, and we've got a lot of people actually coming in. So we'll give folks just a moment or two here to get signed in. Meanwhile, if you'd like to have a little bit of fun with Zoom, a couple of things. Obviously, you see that the presentation part of this has taken up a big part of the screen. Feel free to move things around. The humans are probably more fun and more interactive than the presentation, but we want to keep both up. So feel free to make it a little bit bigger and make our faces bigger. Some of us are going to be better looking than others, but we won't tell that other person which one is, not the better looking one. Meanwhile, as people are coming on, and we've got a lot of people jumping on, hop into the chat and tell us who you are and where you're coming in from. We'd love to see where all of these wonderful people are, what city, what state, what country. Go ahead and hop in the chat and tell us where you are calling in from or zooming in out of. And as we're getting that going, wanted to just welcome everybody. I think we got most of the people on, and we got a couple of people here chatting, so thank you for that. My name is Brett Sklar. I am the marketing chief here at Todyl. I am also lucky to be Julie, your cruise director or your moderator, however you want to look at it today. So we're super glad to have you here. And in just a second, I will introduce all the other panelists. But today's topic is the 5 problems in the MSP security stack that are failing you right now. And this is something we thought important to share with everyone, that we're seeing certain things over and over again that could be a great risk, could be a huge problem for MSPs that might not have the visibility. So we thought we'd bring on some experts, talk about these areas and dive in. We know that it's a challenging environment right now. There's a lot of complexities in the work from home world, and that's accelerated the need to rethink how MSPs like you deliver solutions that will bring that balance of connectivity, productivity, and protection to their clients. So we're going to talk about a lot of new things, and we're going to shed some new light on some opportunities. But meanwhile, please make sure that you are asking us questions along the way. So we've got a Q&A feature going on here. And so I already see somebody who put in the Q&A feature, and they said that they are from the Republic of Texas. So welcome. Your response is bigger because it's from Texas. So thank you for that. But please, as we have ideas that come up, as you have questions, use that Q&A feature. All right, so let's dive in. Who in the heck is going to be talking to you loudly, not loudly, however it goes in this process? So again, Brett, I am just the moderator. I am here to provide some fun and insight, but the real knowledge will come from these fine gentlemen that are on the call with us today. Let's start with introductions and also asking a question of each of you of what got you into this business. So I'd like to first introduce our guest of honor, Bruce McCully, who is the Chief Security Officer of Galactic Advisors. Bruce, welcome. Tell us, well, first of all, you can say hi, but then also tell us what got you into this business.
Hey guys, gosh, thanks for attending today. I see a lot of our clients out there and stuff. A little bit about myself, my background, why I got here. So I grew an MSP to 8.5 million, and I sold it in January. And I know a lot of you guys know me from Robin Robbins. I was just on the road show with a whole bunch of folks out there. And basically what we were doing in our MSP, the way that we showed huge growth the last few years, is we were going into hospitals and recovering them from ransomware. And what we started to notice was that even though we spent all this time kind of investing in helping communicate how these attackers were getting in, they kept getting into the environments. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up putting together some ways to change culture. And part of that made me realize that we had a problem inside of the world of MSPs. So what got me into this was realizing that we needed to make a change to our culture as a group. And so here I am, my mission, the BHAG or whatever you want to call it, is to go out and protect 1 million people. So that's what I'm all about and why I'm here today. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, thank you. Great quantifiable approach. Next up on our panel of experts, we've got John Nellen. John is the CEO of Todyl, and I think a lot of you have had the opportunity to hear about John recently. But John, welcome, and tell us a little bit about you and what got you into this business.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Hi, everyone. So I've been in the space for about 15 years now. Previously ran security and technology at a large HR services provider. Just realized over time, managing that security program was becoming ever increasingly complex, and also ever increasingly expensive, to be totally honest, right? And it didn't have to be. Right. So I set out with the idea of creating an integrated networking and security platform to solve these challenges. Right. And really, we focused on the MSP channel and MSPs and MSSPs in particular, because in my opinion, they have the greatest challenge. Right. It's hard enough getting security and compliance right for a single company. Getting it right for 10, 50, 100, 1,000 different companies is just a tremendous undertaking.
Got it. That's good insights, John. Thank you. And last but not least, our favorite channel chief, Darrin Swan, who is the channel chief of Todyl. Darrin, tell us a little bit about you, and then also what got you into this business.
Excellent. Hello, all. Darrin Swan, the channel chief of Todyl here. And, it's been a great journey career-wise, from the old heydays at HP as a Unix admin, managing 2 data centers, to watching the world kind of change with World Wide Web, Windows 3.1, PC clones, kind of changing the way people worked. Had a lot of billion-dollar companies I worked for, but really where the passion came in was helping small business, right? Small business is the backbone. It's our neighborhood, it's our neighbors, it's, our businesses here, right? And protecting small businesses, the best vehicle is really the trusted advisor, the technology service provider, helping them day in, day out. So we're at a really cool inflection point in technology history as we kind of experience all the things that we're doing, and this kind of work from anywhere world. And right now it's just the moment to seize and lean in. And so what got me into it is similar to John, similar to Bruce, is we want to help protect the masses, right? Everyone deserves to wake up in the morning and feel safe, and we want to help make that happen through you all.
Excellent. Thanks, Darrin. Appreciate that insight. All right, so let's dive in. Now you know our experts, and so you can ask questions to each of them or to all of them. And so when you are asking questions, if you have a specific person you want to ask the question to, just please add that in, and we will support your requests. So it sure does seem like it's an exciting time to embrace remote work, right? We've seen a lot of things come together. Connectivity has become universal. It's also become quite a commodity, right? Everything's moving to the cloud, which seems great until you start thinking about the security ramifications of everything moving to the cloud. Devices are much more powerful, so we don't have to worry about those devices out in the remote world not being strong enough to do business applications. Companies are really starting to embrace flexibility. And especially because of COVID, because of the pandemic, people are embracing working from anywhere and everywhere. So it seems like a great formula for this success with remote working, or this work from anywhere economy. The problem is that we have a lot of harsh realities when it comes to how we do this. And there's a couple of things to think about. So number one, think about those home networks. Think about everything that's going on in your home network: gaming, home automation, artificial intelligence, TV streaming, multiple people being on the network at once. All of these things, all of these IoT devices, there's so much potential security risk that's 10 times more challenging than what you would have in a normal office. So how do we deal with that? And then how do we deal with the fact that the threat actors, the bad guys, the hackers, they're actually figuring out new ways to exploit COVID-19 related methods for us being connected in this world, and really just trying to make our lives a living hell. So that's what I hope we get to dive into today. And that's why we've got the experts here. Darrin, John, Bruce, anything you guys want to add about the harsh realities that we're living in before we dive into our 5 questions?
Just that there's an answer. There's a way. There's a way to protect it, as always, right? We don't have to live in that world.
Yeah. Well, then let's just dive in, because I know we want to try to get to this stuff quickly and get everybody on their way, but learn quite a bit. So let's hit on that first question. And it's the idea of getting around security. And so let me ask this, what are the top gaps in the MSP security stack that bad actors are taking advantage of? Who wants to take a first stab at this one?
I could kick it off, Brett.
Perfect.
So when I see questions like that, usually my approach is to, kind of take a step back and think about the threat landscape, right? So what are we seeing now? What types of attacks are we seeing? Who's executing those attacks and what does it look like, right? So, exploitation of public RDP, VNC, right? Exploitation of public facing services, targeting SaaS apps, right? Increase in ransomware attacks, right? And then at the start of the pandemic, and what continues to be a trend is just a large increase in social engineering, kind of exploiting poor processes or poor workflows in a new work from anywhere environment, right? So kind of taking all that into consideration, like reversing it, typically the gaps that we see and the gaps that are allowing this to take place, three of them, right? So the first one I would say is visibility, right? Ensuring that there's DPI, ensuring that there's SSL inspection, ensuring that you're able to see the traffic, not only from, threat analysis standpoint, right? And, from a SIEM standpoint, being able to ingest it and understand it and analyze it, but also from, like a business standpoint, being able to understand, what are the risk factors, what type of traffic flows you're seeing, right? What are the different user risk profiles? So visibility is key. Next is connectivity, right? So big push to cloud services, opening up all these ports, kind of scrambling to ensure productivity at the drop of a hat. It created a pretty large attack surface area, right? And that's creating the opportunity for threat actors to then go and target that and exploit it. And lastly, the big gap is, nothing new. It has been for a really long time. It's just, difficult to grapple with and effectively implement, but segmentation, right? It's segmentation at the LAN, segmentation also in the WAN as well. But, rise of ransomware, rise of, APTs where they can have a compromised device for a very long period of time, being able to move laterally. Internal segmentation is difficult. It's really hard to get right. And a lot of the technologies available, like, yeah, you can use different sorts of ACLs internally and things like that, but effective and very granular internal segmentation can really help reduce that attack surface area and stop lateral movement. So just to recap my thoughts, visibility, connectivity, and this larger attack surface area, and then segmentation would probably be the top gaps from my perspective.
Got it.
So
Chris,
yeah, I was just going to jump in here. So when you guys are seeing that inside of your client base, I know in our client base and the MSPs that we've audited, even if they have like perimeter routers, so they have the right type of perimeter router that's capable of doing some of the things that you mentioned, like deep packet inspection, or you said DPI, so SSL DPI, even though they have those aren't actually set up, or they're not capable of reviewing the logs quickly enough to even make a response. So sure. I would even say it's a lot of MSPs have invested in the tools, like they have the tools, they just have way too much noise and they don't have the ability to actually go through and figure out what the heck all this stuff means. So I would say the biggest issue right now is one, like a lot of MSPs were investing in all of these different tools and they're not properly configured, so they just create a ton of events. And then I would also add to your comment, John, that you mentioned segmentation, and I see a ton of MSPs that just have very, very flat networks. And so if there was a way to segment those networks a little bit easier for them, I just did an analysis. I was doing a readout this morning, and the MSP had port 3306 open for MySQL. Yet they're wondering like how protected their RMM is, even though it's like sitting there right on the same plane as all of their workstations and the people that are doing support for their users, who are obviously high phishing targets. So I would agree with you, just kind of adding a little bit more color for the folks that are on the call, and they're trying to think about how to build their security stacks to address these things.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, Bruce. Protecting themselves, is key and critical. The RMM, whatever PSA, they're foundational systems that a lot of providers will end up hosting themselves. Create a really, scary one-to-many access to the whole entire client base, right? So really kind of isolating that and shoring it up is key and critical, but importantly, to also then practice what you preach, right? You need to be your own, best security ideal setup, so you can, share that success and, use case with your clients.
I always think about that image from the airplane, right? That has the oxygen masks that come down, right? And it's like you have to protect yourself and help yourself before you can even help others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I would even go as far as to say that a lot of the MSPs, if you're responsible for everybody's computer, you're basically the pilot of the plane. So it's not just like, put your face mask on and protect the person sitting next to you. It's like, put your face mask on so you don't pass out and crash the plane with everybody else on it into the ground in a few minutes.
So let's keep diving. So appreciate the insights and the perspectives. A couple of things as we dive into some of the more questions we've got. Number one is we obviously have a lot of MSPs that are on this call as attendees. And if you have a perspective on this question, or if you agree or you disagree with what some of these panelists are mentioning, feel free to use the chat. I think this is not just a one-way sharing of ideas, but it's a collaboration. So let's use that chat. Again, the Q&A feature as well. Let's make this as interactive as possible so that we're looking at these issues from a lot of different angles. And so if it's okay, let's go ahead and dive into the second big thing that is going on with MSPs and the current security stack. And Darrin will probably lead this question off with you, if that's okay. And it's it's the idea of what office, right? So connectivity is now a commodity. How do you overcome the challenges of the perimeter when the workforce is not really in a perimeter anymore, and they're on these unmanaged networks? Darrin, what are your thoughts?
This is, one of the top subject matters for, when we talk to service providers is really, how do you, contain these free range workers, right? They're out there connecting with impunity, and, they're connecting in from their home network that was probably set up by their teenager with admin. The customer doesn't own it. You didn't set it up. And there's who knows how many different devices that are attached to it, right? It's a scary world in that sense. The idea, is being able to protect that user, right? Wherever they go, wherever they connect. That's kind of, how we like to operate is you want to create a form of peace of mind. And, a big part of, as our shift from protection, which, was so like 5-10 years ago, to now providing a comprehensive security service to your customers, that conversation is around, the world's changed and I'm here to help, make sure that you have peace of mind, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. Because peace of mind is got a lot of value to it. What is the cost of downtime? What is the cost of the, brand tarnishing? All those different things that can happen if there is, an exposure or risk or, deployment of a ransomware, unfortunately.
Yep.
And this is nothing new, right? I think, work from home and things like that, it accelerated with COVID. But if you kind of take a step back, co-working, shared office space, right? There's been this trend going in the direction of distributed organizations using networks. They're just managed by other people. We've seen a lot of co-working spaces and things like that, and you can fire up the network browser and you can see the guy's Sonos 8 floors above you, right? It's usually just giant wide open networks, and that holds true if you're in a public location, if you're co-working, if you're home, if you're anywhere else. And the way I usually think about it is, how do you redefine that edge, right? How do you get control back an environment where the perimeter doesn't really exist anymore? It's like, how do you bring that edge as close as possible? And really, again, a couple of different things. So one is, encryption, encrypted communications, making sure that, you have mandatory encryption. You're not relying on different software or the user to kind of enforce that, whether they have the option to turn on VPN or not, whether they have the option to select, right, what type of protocols they're using. Are they visiting HTTP sites? Do you even know what those applications are doing, right? The next is just, isolation, making sure that those devices aren't interacting with things on or other devices on this untrusted network, right? The guy or person 8 floors above isn't connecting or browsing your shared folders in an open network, right? You have that device isolation and control over isolation for that device. If the user's at an airport, if they're in a Starbucks, wherever they are, it's important. And then the last aspect of it is probably more from a quality of service and delivery standpoint, right? Is, how do you monitor the network that you don't manage, right? How do you ensure that the user's not hitting issues, that they have solid connectivity, that everything else exists, right? And there's a number of different ways to do that, but it's important to have insight into things like, like latency and packet loss and all sorts of other factors that can play into having users operate on networks that you may not be able to have visibility into or really see.
So I guess, John, I have a few questions about your statements that you just made here. And
Yeah.
I know that we didn't want to turn this into a big advertisement for Todyl, but at the same time, I'm curious, and I've been asked this a couple of times from our clients. What's the difference between using Todyl and just getting like a standard always on VPN, like something that, I could get from Semantic or something like this?
Yeah, so there's a lot of differences, right? So, first and foremost is it's not just connectivity, or in this case, like the privacy aspect of it, where your traffic's encrypted and it'll hide your IP or things like that. That's a really small aspect of what it is that we do. But what the important takeaways with Todyl is that, we simplify the network, right? So we simplify the ability to connect users to data, to SaaS apps, to everything else, different sorts of cloud services in a very easy to use way. And we bring the edge down, meaning that it's not only about connectivity, it's about security. So you have your security stack baked in as well. You have, tools like SIEM, you have tools like, SSL inspection, you have everything in one place to give you more of that control and visibility. But really,
John,
it comes down to, yeah.
I'm sorry to just jump in here,
Sure,
but
no,
when
please,
you say
please
bring
do.
the edge down, help me with that. Let's make sure everybody gets that on the call. Like when you say bring the edge down, what exactly do you mean?
Yeah. So if you think about, having some sort of VPN connection, typically it'll be like a firewall in an office that's, collecting dust if no one's there now, right? That you can consider as kind of your headquarters or your office edge, right? Meaning it's your point of control, it's your perimeter, it's where you have a lot of your network security controls in place, you have everything else. But in an environment where you just had everyone kind of, spray across the United States or even internationally, they're all working in different locations, maybe they're opening up additional offices or anything else, having all of that traffic go back to what your edge is, right, in the office, then go out to the internet is highly inefficient and also creates a lot of complexity, because now you're managing these connections from potentially all over the world, going back to single place or maybe one or two different places, backhauling all that traffic, right? It's what we do, and what Todyl does is we have these data centers, right, in different locations all over the world. So the user just connects to whatever the nearest and fastest data center is, and that serves as the edge, meaning they have an encrypted tunnel to it, right? All the security is baked in there. You have visibility into what's happening, right? You have all the different controls that we mentioned previously. But you don't have to worry about bringing it back to a single place, right? Because now your edge could be brought to the users in wherever they're located. Hopefully that clarified a little bit.
Yeah, and so let me make a suggestion here, because I think we've got a couple more questions to go through, and I think this topic is going to come up in a couple of different ways.
Sure.
The idea of how we protect through a perimeter versus how we protect with a VPN versus how we protect with, quite frankly, Todyl. And I use Todyl as a category because there's nothing else like it that's out there. And it's the whole idea that security is now baked into the actual device, and you can move beyond the firewall, move beyond the VPN, because everything is about the device and about the user, and bringing that level of protection down to that person. But I think we'll uncover that more as we get into some of these more questions about sort of how that works. So Bruce, I appreciate you bringing that question up, and let's just keep going, because I think we've got, so there's two things. Obviously we have a special offer that we're going to give to everybody who's actually on this live webinar at the end. And then number two is we've actually got some really good questions that I'm excited for us to get into, including a bonus question. We lied. There's 6 questions. The 6th one's actually really, really good. So we're going to just keep going through here. So the next question is, how do you maintain control and visibility when all of the devices and the workforce are out in the wild? And this is something I've heard from a lot of MSPs. And I think that the challenge I've seen is that MSPs maybe don't feel like they can get control, or that it might not be their place to get that visibility and control. But I'm guessing there's some different perspectives here. And Bruce, I'd like to start with you, and then go to Darrin, and then John, end with you, because I think you've got some good perspectives there as well. But Bruce, what are your thoughts about this? Like, where does the MSP supposed to fit in this, and how can they have that control and visibility?
Yeah, before I even jump into the control aspect, I just want to share a story that happened about 3 weeks ago. So one of our partners was dealing with a user at home, just like we're describing. They had a just the Comcast connection. I mean, you guys, most users, they don't go out and buy anything special. It was just like the Comcast Motorola little router that they had plugged into a wireless network that they were on, and they were VPNing into their office. And so the way that this whole thing came up, the way that anybody even noticed that something was going on, is there was a bunch of attempts to log into their server as a domain admin. And this was at their office. So basically what was happening is the device that was at a home was infected with something you guys are probably aware of. It's a type of ransomware kit called KegTap. So it's a rat. So it gives people remote access to the machine so that they can basically use that machine to go and attack other items on the network. And there was just no visibility into it. Like the MSP had no idea that they were on that device. And the only reason that they figured it out was because they started to see these different login attempts on the server itself. So the reason that I'm bringing this up and how this all relates back to how to maintain control and visibility when you have devices everywhere is, from my perspective, it's creating the ability to see when somebody's attempting to move laterally inside of the environment, especially when you're bringing in devices like this one that weren't really owned by the company. I know that's not best practice. It's not something I'd recommend by any means, but I know a lot of folks had to get users access from home very quickly, and some of them are still at home using that same access. So just imagine, Mary, the user that was sitting at her desk for the last 10 years, she created tons of tickets for you because she couldn't get her printer to work half the time, is now a remote warrior, like working at home, using the computer that her kids were using earlier to do whatever they were doing. And that's really created a challenge. And like I said, I think the best way to do that, of course, is getting some visibility on what's moving through the network.
Yep. Darrin, what's your take?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different adjectives used, sometimes disparaging of the end user, right? Just on really wanting, most importantly, service providers wanting to remove the choice of whether the end user uses something to protect themselves. Security, at that device, should just always be on. It's not a choice whether they protect the company or not, right? Or themselves for that matter. And, a big part of that too is, how you create a lot of that different isolation, back to that home use case, or McDonald's or the hotel for that matter. There's so many different little variables on that home network that you really want to work towards an isolation of of that user to that network. They may still need to, print to their local, printer or scanner, what have you. Cool. You can tighten things up there, but the idea is, we're in a software-defined world, right? And so you can dial and control, some of those user behavioral, things that you like to come up with adjectives to describe their bad choices. But you can, kung fu kind of manage some of that stuff, right? So the idea is like prevention. I mean, that's the great part about, software networking and security and combined as a kind of solution set is, how do you combat all those bad decisions that could be potentially made by the end user and don't allow it to eliminate that noise, those problems.
Gotcha. John, anything to add?
No, just something very quick. Distributed environments. It's always important to have visibility and collection both at the network level and the endpoint level, right? And make sure that the tools and other platforms or products that are being used are actually correlating between the two, right? That's critical for getting the big picture and having observability across everything. But I believe that echoed what both Bruce and Darrin said.
Got it. All right, so let's just keep diving in here. There's this idea of finding the balance. And so the question really is, how do MSPs prioritize and effectively deliver productivity, connectivity, security, and compliance? Seems like a lot of things. And we obviously don't want to turn this into an advertisement for Todyl, which can cover all these things very easily for MSPs. Sorry, I had to say it. But how do MSPs day to day, deal with these things, handle them, cover them? So who'd like to take a stab at this?
I can go first, and I'll make it quick, Brett. Just putting on my CISO hat here real quick. The perspective that I have, is that the most important job of IT and security is to support revenue, right? Like nothing else matters when it comes to the business, because without revenue, the business fails and everyone else fails around it, right? So thinking through that, and from the perspective of it's the job to support and protect that revenue stream, whether that's done through security, whether that's done through connectivity, it doesn't really matter, right? So obviously connectivity and productivity are, kind of the first two things that tend to be attacked in the environment and in that order, right? And that's kind of what we saw post-COVID or right at the start of it right away. The second thing I just want to say real quick is, security and compliance, there's a big difference between the two, right? You can have effective security, right? And you can have compliance security, and they're not always the same, right? You can have effective security that's non-compliant, and you can have compliance security that's not effective, right? So thinking through whenever there's a big shift in the business, right, and whenever there's a big undertaking, it's always important to ensure that the security is effective in the new operating norms, and then kind of backing that into from a compliance standpoint as well. But just really it's the perspective of having that hat on of how to approach the problem and thinking about effective versus compliance and what the business needs most.
Yeah, and I think there's a big mind shift, thinking, and I think we've all been conditioned with, the PSAs and the RMMs to effectively operate in a reactive whack-a-mole model, right? You wake up in the morning and what's the pile of stuff that you have to go, knock down? And, right now we have probably the most greatest single moment to enable our customers' business than we've ever likely have had throughout our whole customer's history, right? And that takes leaning in. Leaning into how we can enable their business, right? You've seen it with all the different like consumer or restaurants or other products or services that we've experienced in the last 6 months. What have they done? They've all embraced, quadrupled down, the ones that survived on digital, right? And with that brings a lot of those risks and variables that we talked about throughout the presentation. With that said, we have a need and almost a demand, a requirement, expectation from the customer to see them through this, and a big part of it is to protect them through it and connect them through it, and then make sure with compliance side of things, that they're adhering to the things that could totally disrupt their business as well. So I think it's more of this proactive, let's go prevent, let's go make sure we're setting up our clients for business success, because you have the most compelling reason to go speak to them right now about it.
Perfect.
And I would
think
just
that's a good perspective.
Yeah, I would just throw on top of that whack-a-mole comment. So when I read this question, I read it differently. When I looked at effectiveness, I thought about the effectiveness of the team. Like, when I was running my MSP, I was always looking for ways to become more efficient and deliver more with less labor. And I think, it's not just about getting the ability for people to work remotely and to be safe working remotely. I think that's very important, but it's also the ability to not have to deal with like cleaning up a ransomware event or dealing with a breach that really those tickets take so long to get through, that that just really impacts your overall productivity as a team from the MSP side. And one of the concepts that I think people on this call should be thinking about is how do we become more effective at delivering these solutions, right? So one of the partners, like one of our partners, it actually has point-to-point VPNs with every single one of their remote users on their team has a UTM. They have a little Fortinet at their house, and think about how much work that is to maintain versus a software solution like Todyl, where they just are able to run this one piece of software and have it all being taken care of for them. They don't have to get static IP addresses and stuff like that. So I would just add figuring out ways to be more effective. And this isn't just on the perimeter. This is things like cloud services and stuff like this. So you're not running out and running a truck to people's offices right now.
Gotcha. Well,
Yeah,
I tell you, we've got two more questions. Sorry, Darrin, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's, finding the balance is kind of investing in today so tomorrow's better.
Yep.
I think a lot of time, from an engineering or, networking or help desk standpoint, you're always going to have a big pile of things due tomorrow, right? Always, always, always. But, what can you do today to eliminate some of those extra noise elements, right? To Bruce's comment there.
Gotcha.
Do it today.
Gotcha. So just a quick heads up, we've got a couple of questions that came in through the Q&A as well as through the chat. So we'll definitely hit those as we get towards the end. So thank you for sending those questions, and wanted you to know that we're not forgetting about you. We're just going to make sure we save the best for last. How's that sound? All right, so let's just keep diving through. We've got two more questions, just a couple of more minutes. So we're going into, I'll call it lightning round. And we've kind of covered some of this, and I'd be interested to hear, and I think Darrin, I'd like to hear from you first about this, because I think you've had some hands-on experience really working with the MSPs. But how do MSPs pivot to this security first or cloud first program for their clients? What's been your formula for success, and how we've gotten so many MSPs to really look at this from a security first, cloud first perspective?
Yeah, it's rethinking, how they deliver IT with security, as the first step, right? How am I going to protect what I'm deploying and what I'm managing, right? The security first mindset is really a preventative and proactive one. You want to, make sure your doors and windows and alarm and all these things are locked and secured when you leave the house, and when you're typically deploying out new network infrastructure or application infrastructure, all these different things, you're looking at it from more a functional standpoint. Can a user log in and gain access to things versus are they going to be protected while they do that? And so there is a bit of reframing and thinking, and there's a lot of products out there in the market that somewhat of a not distraction, just a distraction, but also where do you start, where do you begin? And that's a big part of where I think the security world is going, is more of a unified, consolidated approach. It has to. You can't scale an effective security strategy with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 products, right? It just doesn't work. So I think the idea of waking up to security and prevention and eliminating problems in the first place, is a more effective approach to take.
Bruce, what's your take on this? What's your experience?
Yeah, mine's very simple. You might want to grab a pen if you're on the call right now, because this is going to be a really simple one. Start with yourself. Okay. The very first thing that you should do if you're considering making a change to the way that you're providing services to your clients is start internally. If you're going to move to a cloud first type solution, then move your own stuff, see how that works. Make sure that if you're going to put all your clients in Azure, that you try it out and your RMM works great in Azure and you're happy with those results and you know how to secure it.
Perfect. All right, well, let's dive into the best and last question that I think is on a lot of people's minds. And then after that, we're going to talk about the offer that we've got. And then we've got some questions coming in, actually some pretty interesting questions, different than I thought they were going to be, but we'll get to that here in just a moment. So the last question, we'll call this the bonus question, the free question, is a fun one. And Bruce, I'd love to hear from you first on this one. And then John, I think you and Darrin have probably talked about this enough to where you can probably cover it from the Todyl perspective. But let's talk about the future. And the future is not too far out in the future. We're November something, 18th already. So, you know, you don't have to put on the big glasses, just the little reading glasses. But what does 2021 hold in store for MSPs? Bruce, lead it away.
Gosh, you know, if I answered a question much like this in December of last year, and I was completely wrong. Like I had no idea that everybody was going to be working on their houses and all this crazy stuff that we'd be dealing with a new perimeter, which is now all of those endpoints that are out there. So I just want to say I'm not so good at this question. I've gotten it wrong before. But one thing that I that I see coming is we're going to see people, we're already seeing it. We're seeing people getting locked back down. You've seen in Michigan, Washington, other places where they're not able to go back to the offices again. And I think we're going to see a number of basically phases where our clients are working from home, then they're allowed to not work from home, and then they're working from home and ... So we're going to have to get really good at moving them from one environment to another, or figure out how to teach, you know, Printer Mary how to move herself from one spot to another better. So that's what I see coming. I also, and I'm usually a really optimistic dude, but I see things getting a little tighter with the economy. And so it's going to be really important that if you're running an MSP, that you're thinking about your labor and you're thinking about how to keep that down as you grow your client base. And that's right, I said grow your client base, because most of our partners, like the folks that are using our services, they're growing right now. And so we're seeing that across the board. I don't have a single partner that hasn't made new sales in the last 3 months. So I do think you're going to be growing, but as you grow, it's going to be really critical that you keep a very close eye on your labor and the complexity of managing that labor. Gotcha.
Thanks, Bruce. John, and we have a little bit of time left, but I think you're thinking about this all the time, just because of building the vision for Todyl. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so two big things. And then Bruce, I'm curious on your thoughts on the second, but I'll start with what I think is, you know, probably one of the largest potential changes, which is really 5G, right? And, you know, we've been hearing about this for years. It's slowly starting to come to reality. If you look at the 5G maps, it's, you know, very small geographic areas actually have, you know, very high throughput, very high performance. However, what it's doing is it's starting to make connectivity ubiquitous, right? Even outside some of the super dense areas that may already have free Wi-Fi and other sorts of connectivity available, right? You know, Verizon Home Service in New York, for example, is just using 5G now, right? Saves a lot of money running that physical infrastructure. But it's a tremendous opportunity to take a step back and really think about, you know, the difference between the network and connectivity, right? Where with, you know, 5G enabled laptops coming to market, right? A lot of these home internet connections being based on 5G and everything else, you know, how do you connect and protect an organization? But also, what does that mean for your business, right? Can you do it in a more cost-effective manner? Some of the partners that we have kind of on the bleeding edge are experimenting with things by, you know, almost going national in certain markets that have 5G, where they have 5G enabled devices that they can just drop ship with Todyl on them. I think there is a lot of opportunity to kind of reframe the mindset and the difference between networking and connectivity, and then what that means for the MSP, especially as Bruce mentioned before, from an efficiency standpoint and also a cost standpoint. I think that's big. The second thing is, you know, Bruce, I'm curious on your thoughts here, but third-party risk, right? I mean, basically this year, everyone has changed, right? Their infrastructure, their security programs, everything else. And I could only imagine that a lot of these larger companies, especially, as you go up, kind of the ladder in company size, even a lot of the regulators are going to be pushing down onto the enterprises to understand, well, what's your third-party risk now, pushing due diligence and other sorts of audits and risk assessments downstream, because they're aware that a lot of the smaller businesses who work with these larger enterprises have basically changed the way that they operate, right? And in order to ensure the ongoing security and compliance of these larger organizations, they're going to be focusing on that third-party risk, especially if they're small and medium businesses, right? That may come in the form of, direct due diligence, that may come in the form of, direct information requests or audits, or it may even come through additional forms of regulation that may be popping up, in industry-specific verticals. But I find it hard to think that won't be happening. I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming. So those are kind of the two things top of mind for at least myself on what 2021 has in store.
And I would just add to that, John. I completely agree with you on the third-party risk component. I mean, we're already starting to see it for some of our clients that we do CISO services for, and so that's definitely coming out. If you, folks on the call, if you're thinking about your security stack and you're not sure what should be in it or where things should be, or you have different types of clients, right? You have basic clients all the way through compliance-driven clients. We have a worksheet for you. It's www.galacticscan.com/worksheet. There's a slash at the end of that. You got to put the slash at the end. I think we'll get that over into the chat here.
I'm putting it into the chat as we
Awesome.
speak so that people can have access to it.
Perfect. So that might help you as you start to kind of figure out what you really need for these remote workers. And the worksheet is the original design was for all of the workers in your environment, but I would do it twice. I'd fill it out once for your remote workers and then once for the workers that are actually in the office, or those folks that are moving back and forth. I'd definitely be spending the time thinking about both perspectives.
Cool. And I'd add one more prediction. I think 2021 is going to bring more industry consolidation, and not from M&A, but from service providers that are leaning in, taking away clients from other service providers that are failing or flailing. So it's a great time to be leaning into the market.
So at this point, I'd like to, and I apologize for cutting people off a little bit as we shorten our answers, but a couple of things. I want to offer the exclusive offer, and then we've got several questions that have come in during it that I want to cover. And so if it's okay, Darrin, I'll throw this over to you. So what do the people who actually participate in today's call get as their special offer or their exclusive offer?
Yeah, so reach out and we'll provide some of the contact details. But for the attendees here, we're going to protect your business for a year at no cost. So what we're talking about is practicing what you preach, and protect your own self first. We'll provide no cost licenses for your internal team, and we'll get you some more details through our call and demo that we'll provide you guys.
Okay, so wait a second, Darrin. I just want to make sure that I completely understand what you're offering. So what you're saying is that if I run an MSP and I'm on this call, that you would provide Todyl to me for my engineers that are working all over the place, so that they have, basically the same tools that having a corporate router on each of those different locations would have?
Absolutely.
Wow, cool.
So Bruce, what do you got?
I got a worksheet.
Perfect. All right, perfect. I love it. I was just trying to challenge you there a little bit. All right, so let's dive into some of the questions that came in, because I think we're getting some really good questions that came up. And it's funny because somebody actually mentioned this, and I think I'll ask 2 or 3 of these questions to you, because I think you can cover them with one fell swoop. But the first one is, as much as you don't want to turn this into a sales pitch, can you tell us what Todyl does to help with these questions that have been covered? The second question I think we can answer alongside that is, it was about the question of the Todyl versus a VPN. And he said, the question wasn't the difference between Todyl and regular VPN to Office, but the difference between Todyl and other VPN services like Symantec. So John, I'll put you in the hot seat here and let you talk about what you love to talk about. And that is, what is Todyl and how does it work? And comparing it to specifically Todyl and other VPN services like Symantec.
Okay, so round two, let me try again. So yeah, I mean, it's essentially what Todyl is. How's it work? You put a piece of software on your devices. So, Mac, Windows, iOS, Android, Linux is in beta right now. But then basically what it does is open up an encrypted connection to what we call the secure global network, right? So that's a network of all of our points of presence, all of our data centers around the world. And every tenant, it's a multi-tenant portal. So every tenant that you have basically gets their own isolated secure global network that goes around all the devices connect to a single place. And what you can do is you can also connect in clouds, the edge of an office, really whatever you need through an IPsec tunnel. So now you have all your devices, all your locations, all your clouds on a single global network, regardless of where anyone is located. Something important I want to mention is that I'll talk on security next, but all the devices get a cloud IP address that gets issued to them. And what that means is that unlike other solutions, you can actually communicate device to device. So for example, if you have a computer in the office, a user at home, they need remote access, all that you need to do is put the agent on both devices and they can directly communicate between it, right? So you have control over that. It's zero trust, meaning that you can control specifically what protocols you want. You can lock down all of that traffic, both going east, west, and north, south out to the internet. And you can also isolate those devices on the home network. So we have zero trust both at the WAN and zero trust at the LAN also, right? So if you have users using shared networks, untrusted networks, things like that, you can fully isolate that device so they can't communicate with anything else on those untrusted networks. Hopefully that gives a little bit more or color and context into what Todyl is and answers the VPN question also.
All right, so John, just to push you a little bit on this, so I'm working remote, like I go to a coffee shop and I connect to free Wi-Fi. Am I protected or am I screwed?
No, you'll be protected. So that encrypted tunnel that gets opened from that device to the cloud is going to stop any sort of eavesdropping, data collection attacks, things like that, right? We changed the public IP address, so the privacy is baked in as well. You have all of the network security controls you would expect, so firewall, IPS IDS, SSL inspection, all, secure DNS, all of that's baked in together. And then when you add on the LAN zero trust, right, you just turn that on. It means that if they're in that coffee shop, none of the other devices can see that device running Todyl in that coffee shop as well. And SIEM is built into the platform. You can turn on with a couple clicks, meaning that you get all that device data, you get all the network data coming in, giving you visibility into what's happening, even if the user is in a coffee shop.
Okay, great. Now, one other question, because this, I think this is very hard for people to describe. How would I describe Todyl to one of my clients? Like if I were on this call and I'm going to one of my clients and explaining the benefits or trying to explain, okay, basically, how do I describe it to a 5-year-old?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I could see Darrin getting revved up, so I'll pass the mic to him.
Yeah, it's the great challenge, right? Is really kind of, normalizing some technical terms into end user stuff, which is, hey, you've got anxiety over the end users working out there in the wild, connecting with impunity. And this really helps them ghost from the network and they disappear, so wherever they go, wherever they connect in from, the company's assets are protected. The end user is protected. Importantly, the VPN is a choice by the end user. This is always on. The end user, wherever they go, wherever they connect, they're not a threat, they're protected. So ghosting from a network, resonates very, very well. You're encrypted, you're anonymized, you disappear, but then importantly, that traffic is always inspected.
The one thing, the macro way that I would explain it is that when people are moving to a remote world or they're moving to a work from anywhere world, no longer is the office an important part of their security and connectivity strategy. So it's time to rethink how you bring that security and protection and connectivity to every single user and every single device when it becomes decentralized. So Todyl is the answer for not only decentralizing, but also maintaining control and maintaining visibility without losing a step. Compliance still has to be there, security still has to be there, data protection still has to be there. Todyl just makes it possible outside of the office and even globally. And by the way, it could be in the office or out of the office. And so that's the way that I'd probably address on it as well. Let me dive into a few more questions that have come in. One question, a simple one, and John, I think you can answer this. What are the bandwidth limitations for Todyl?
Yeah, so I'll answer this as quick as possible. We don't throttle, right? So packet processing is done in software. So some of it comes down to what type of device that you have. So typically what we see is, devices will do 150 to 300 megs per second. And then again, that depends on what software is running, what sort of, hardware resources the device has. If you have a 1 gig pipe, put 4 devices next to each other, they'll absolutely saturate that 1 gig pipe. And typically, if you have multi-core processor, there's not that big of an impact on the end user performance experience.
Gotcha. Perfect. So I will say this really quickly, and I'm going to type this into the chat. If we don't get to your question, because we've got a few more questions that are coming in, and we've only got about 4 minutes left, let's go ahead and I'm going to put Darrin's email address in here, and then Darrin will be your point person for answering those questions. So I'll go ahead and I'll take care of that in the chat. So one of the other questions that came in is, and sorry, I was looking, there's a couple of them that came in. When in the office, if a user is isolated with Todyl, how are office services accessed? Printers, file servers, backup, et cetera.
Yeah, just real quick, you have complete control over that. That comes down to the internal segmentation. So you could actually make exceptions depending on where you want that traffic to go, and really, reduce that attack surface area. So you have full control over it. You can even do a setup where it only activates if they leave the office. So it's really, configurable and flexible up to how you want to design it and implement it.
And then you have access to those same resources when you're out in the field, right? Without a VPN, because it's just always on.
Correct. Right? Exactly. It's the same experience in or out of the office. Thank you, Bruce.
So another question that came in is, and this is a compare and contrast question. What is the difference between Todyl and Cisco Umbrella?
Yeah, so Cisco Umbrella has kind of a wide offering. Typically what's used is more the DNS level protection with like a roaming client. Todyl, we have a lot more controls in place than just that, right? So, first and foremost, we have this global network of POPs, we have Cloud VPN and, other functionality that's built in. So you can, you unite your clouds, unite your locations, unite your users all in a single network that's configurable, controllable. The next thing is that, the agents have that cloud IP. So you could do that agent to agent communication, which greatly simplifies a lot of deployments, right? So device at home, device in the office, takes honestly less than 5 minutes to just get that set up and ready to go. Zero trust is baked in, things that we mentioned before, DPI, SSL inspection, firewall, everything else, but also SIEM is baked in as well, right? So the way we look at it, Umbrella does, a small subset of what Todyl does, but again, Todyl is designed to be a networking security platform versus a point solution like Umbrella that, addresses a very specific need or goal in an overall security program.
So one last question, then we can each do a quick wrap up, and then we can send everybody on their way to go and find great new ways of being successful as MSPs. The last question is, and thanks Ed, you win for having the best last question. How do we talk to clients that have some staff in a secure head office with desktops? Would they need Todyl, or do we focus on selling just for workers that are remote or occasionally remote?
Yeah, no, you want it in that head office also, right? That's how you can have that LAN segmentation. You could stop that lateral movement, right? You have control over the internal network, and that's absolutely critical, right? There's a reason why, ransomware continues to go on the rise, right? Because it's effective. It's effective, right? So being able to segment that internal network and, having flexibility as well, right? As, Bruce mentioned, a lot of business owners may be still figuring out the direction that they want to take. Do they want to have multiple locations, single location, part-time work from home, things like that? A solution like Todyl gives you the flexibility to deliver networking and security regardless of, the direction the business goes in, which is, a tremendous benefit also.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Well, listen, on our last minute we've got here, first of all, I just want to say thank you to every single person that was on this call. We had quite a few people joining, so thank you. And looks like just about everybody stayed on the entire time. So that's pretty awesome. Any final parting thoughts? And briefer is better. from our amazing panelists today?
Yeah, I think just reach out. We want to help you kind of protect yourself to start, right? So we'll go through and get you up to speed on the platform. Address technical questions, but help you deploy and install and get yourself solid.
Yeah,
Darrin, just really quickly, we've gotten a lot of questions about how do we get that offer. All you have to do is send an email to either Darrin@todyl.com or to the sales team, which is sales@todyl.com, and we'll take care of you. We'll also follow up with an email after this. Sorry, Bruce, go ahead.
Oh, yep. No, my closing comments are very simple. You're the pilot of your plane. Make sure you put on your mask first. I like John's comment there about putting on your oxygen mask. So whatever you guys decide to do it in-house first and get it working.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Right.
I think this is just real quick, Brett. I think this is an exciting time, right? I think that there's a lot of change and a lot of opportunity as well. Yeah, so to rethink about how you deliver services, rethink about a lot of different things in this environment. There's a lot of opportunity.
Great. Well, listen, again, everyone, thank you so much. I think this has been a great dialogue. We've got a lot more questions that have come in that we'll be following up to each person with, as well as we'll do a follow-up blog post to cover a lot of these things, and we'll share that with you as well. So on behalf of myself, John, and Darrin, and Bruce, thanks. Have a great day, and we're looking forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.